Hello, fellow sojourners. I'm your host, Dave Layton, and welcome to Travel with a Purpose, a podcast designed to keep sojourners and friends informed, entertained, and inspired. In today's episode, we'll be talking about a very important issue for new RVers. We'll look at the origins of what is one of the most favorite pastime for RVers. No, I'm not talking about baseball or cooking s'mores or even watching new arrivals set up their rig. I'm talking about the great American game of cornhole. I started researching this game because I thought it was an important area to clear up any misconceptions. So I did extensive research on the internet about this important topic. I found some really interesting facts. And since it's on the internet, we know it has to be true. Well, there are several myths or legends, or perhaps outright fabrications about the origin of this great pastime. Well, here's what I discovered. Well, first of all, you might be wondering, what is cornhole? Well, cornhole is a game also known as beanbag toss, or bags. It can be played indoors or outdoors by any gender and any age. The modern version involves at least 2 players, usually 4. And they try to toss small bags filled with corn kernels or rice or beans or other such substances into a hole on a slightly tilted platform, or at least to land the bag on the platform closest to the hole. Each player takes turns until a predetermined score is reached. Well, that's an overview of the generally accepted rules. But these rules can change depending on the factors such as age, physical condition, and in some cases, the amount of adult beverages consumed. Of course, adult beverages is not an issue for sojourners, I hope. So why be concerned about the history of this game? Well, understanding the history, no matter how questionable the source or outrageous the information, adds to the enjoyment and appreciation for this classic pastime. Like many such activities, the origin of the game is obscured in history. The myths and legends, however, grow with each generation. One popular legend has it that a farmer named Jebediah McGillicuddy invented the game. Now, I'm not casting dispersions on old Jebediah, but I have to say that with a name like McGillicuddy, one might begin to suspect its authenticity. Well, as legend has it, old Jebediah was a Midwestern farmer who was bored while working the fields. So he came up with the idea of a game to play while they were on break. He supposedly made some cornhole boards out of leftover pieces of wood and dried corn kernels. He didn't use bags at first. He simply tried to get the corn kernels into the hole. Now, one variation of this legend is that the boards were actually scrap lumber left over from making coffins. I think there might have been some adult beverages involved in the origin of this legend, if not in old Jebediah himself. Well, another popular legend is that cornhole was invented by the Native Americans. This legend has that the Black Hawk or Apache and Choctaw Indians all played a similar game using stones or small bags filled with beans instead of corn. Players would toss the bags into holes in the ground. Now, this obviously predated old Jebediah that I mentioned before. Perhaps, if they had worked together with old Jebediah, they could have gotten some of the leftover boards from the coffins. Yet still a third legend is that it was invented by soldiers during the American Civil War. There's no indication of whether it was the Northern soldiers or soldiers of the Confederacy. I suspect soldiers of the Confederacy, since cornhole is a very popular game in the South. In fact, I think I'll add to the legend by stating it was probably some good old boys from Georgia. According to this legend, soldiers would pass the time between battles by tossing bags filled with beans into holes dug into the ground, much the same way as the Native American legend. Some even claim this game was actually a training exercise to help soldiers practice their aim, not that the boys from Georgia needed training in aiming their rifles. Now, knowing soldiers, they were just as likely to have opened the bags and cooked the beans for dinner after a good round of cornhole. Perhaps if the soldiers from both armies had gotten together to settle their differences with a good cornhole tournament, things would have been better resolved in less time and less trouble. One last legend before we go start our own round of cornhole. There's a legend that this great American pastime was actually started by a German immigrant to America. According to this legend, the game was a carnival-like game of knocking down cans. In fact, the German name for the game is Dosenwerfen, which actually means can throwing. The competitors would throw beanbags or other objects at stacked cans. The objective was to knock down as many cans as possible. Well, that's some of the legends of the origin of cornhole, the great RV pastime. The only thing I know for certain is that myths and legends can be entertaining. Perhaps you have a theory of your own about the origin of this great game. If so, let me know, and I'll add it to our list. No matter the origin, this game continues to grow in popularity. Some have even gone so far as to turn it into a professional sport. Well, I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't see some good old boys from Georgia making it into an Olympic sport someday. We even have cornhole game boards at Camp B for sojourners to enjoy if they're not playing the other favorite game, hand and foot. This is yet another reason to visit Camp B. In fact, if we're here when you are here, then I offer an open challenge to anyone to a rousing game. I know from experience that Pat Raines tosses a mean beanbag, and I want her for a teammate. Well, friends, that wraps up our episode of the history of the great American RV game of cornhole. I appreciate you joining us in this podcast. If you're interested in being a guest on our podcast, or you know someone we should have as a guest, or if you have a topic you would like us to discuss, please email me at sojournersevangelize@gmail.com. That's sojournersevangelize@gmail.com. Also, please follow our podcast to keep updated when new episodes are published. I'm your host, Dave Layton, and remember, we glorify God as together we travel with a purpose.